My name is Jay Price, and like you, I've been worshiping at home for the past several months, watching, for example, the services on YouTube. I've also found this a time for personal devotion, and this is an opportunity to explore a type of spirituality that is often unappreciated in our modern world. Today, we tend to associate going to church with being religious. However, in many cultures, worshiping at home is as important, if not more important, than going to public worship events. There's a rich tradition of household shrines where patron saints, patron deities, ancestors, and other figures of devotion are part of everyday household rituals. In the Jewish community, worship often takes place around the dinner table, where Shabbat begins with the lighting of candles at the family meal. And the Christian tradition as well has explored this, from elaborate chapels for the wealthy to personal shrines in homes for everyday people. So here is a chance for you to rejoin that tradition. Now, a couple of things to think about. First, this is about personal journey. This isn't about doing it right or wrong. This is about finding that tradition that is the most meaningful for you. Above all, worship at home, whether we're talking about a personal devotion, a family Bible study, a family hymn sing, or joining in on a virtual church service, is all about finding the sacred in the everyday. So as we embark on this, there are a couple of things to think about. First, it's about creating the setting for worship. And that setting involves three major elements. The first is place. The second is time. And the third is tone. So, place. Find a spot out of the hubbub of your everyday life where you can engage in worship. Now, this might be the dinner table. Convert that ordinary dinner table into something spiritual if you worship there. Perhaps it's that chair that you enjoy sitting in. Perhaps it's a special nook where you have a personal altar or you have a personal focal space to contemplate more spiritual activities. Where it's located isn't as important as what takes place there. This can be anywhere in the home, it can be outside, it can be in the middle of your everyday activities. Martin Luther, for example, said that one can pray at the workbench as much as at the altar. So it's about creating that special space. Now, one way to do this is to have an object or element for focus. So you might be focusing on, for example, an icon. You might be having a candle. You might have a particular scene that means something. Perhaps there is a photograph or an object from a loved one for whom that is especially meaningful. And in a lot of ways, they're going to be joining you in your personal devotion because of that. The second element, and perhaps the more important element in this, is time. This is about taking time out of your day. It's about pause. It's about Sabbath. So as you begin a worship period, try as much as possible to keep it as free from distractions. This is a time to center yourself. Have quiet. Enjoy the quiet. Perhaps have a small time where you can focus on your breathing, or engage in a small prayer, or just be. And then once that pause has taken place, that begins the worship space, then go into your devotion, your reading, your worship. And when you've finished, again, a point of pause, and then a ritual of some sort to signal to yourself that the worship time is now over and you may resume. So that entry, pause, event, pause, resumption helps create a pacing for this type of practice. In addition to time away from activities, it's also important to have time for activities. This is a chance for you to be in connection with God, with the divine, with those thoughts and feelings that you often don't get a chance to explain or explore, except at a time like this. This is a very special time. And this is also a time with individuals, emotions, and thoughts. That time with is worth developing more. You might be doing this on your own, but this might be a time for you to be with your family, your loved ones, your children, your pets. And you might want to bring them into the worship as well. Here's a chance for you to talk with your children about what's important to you in your faith journey, the traditions of your own family, the traditions of your faith, and help them and guide them. Make this a special time for them. They'll remember that. This is also a time to be in connection with other Christians around the world, Christians who have passed. Perhaps you're in communion with your loved ones who are no longer with us in this world. Perhaps you have items from their lives that are with you to help keep that connection there. Perhaps you're with Father Otis Gray and Father Sam West, our founders at St. James, and you're in communion with them while you're involved with your own worship. So there are lots of ways to think about this. Finally, think about tone. And tone is useful to consider through the 5 senses. So to create this sensual experience, let's think about what those 5 senses can convey. It's about focusing on what's important and not getting distracted. So we think about sight. Perhaps, again, the object, that point of focus is worth developing. Maybe you change it out a bit. Maybe you find something different at different times. Maybe you do something visually that makes this meaningful. Perhaps lighting the candle is a visual symbol for the fact that personal devotion is taking place. Perhaps you wear liturgically appropriate colors, so red for Pentecost and white for the holidays and green for ordinary time and so forth. And then we get to sound. Now, sound is where emotion comes. A colleague of mine who worked in the film industry said that visual cues gave you information, but it was the sound that conveyed the emotion. It's the soundtrack that gives meaning to a lot of film scenes. And so you might want to think about something like a bell to begin a worship period. Notice the ringing lasts a time. This might be a nice way to time that entry into worship. So as you ring, let that time during the ringing be that downtime before you begin. There are a lot of ways you can do this. You can use a bell bowl like this. You can find a bell wherever you have it in your own collection. But don't forget that this is about having the ordinary becoming part of the sacred. So if you have an object like this is an ordinary bowl, but now you have a sound to usher in a point of meditation. And in one sense, this is just a bowl. On the other hand, here is an object that you use to make dinner for your family, and now it is being welcomed into your private worship to help you connect with that which is divine. How cool is that? Another sense that's worth thinking about is smell. And it's in smell where we really get those deep connections. Think about that smell of a loved one's perfume. Think about the smell of your mother's cooking. And there's that one dish that you immediately go to when you smell that. And that's part of this experience. So let that be an element to bring in. So maybe there's a scented candle. Maybe there is a particular object that has a scent to it that you love. Perhaps it's about incense, allergies permitting, I understand. But it's a way of connecting in, again, those senses. Taste is one that we understand certainly through the Eucharist. And remember that holidays are associated with food. And so perhaps you want to bring taste into this. Maybe you do your worship before or after a meal, so let the food be a continuation of this. Perhaps there's a special food or a special drink that you bring in to this devotional time that you don't use at other times. And don't be afraid to use maybe the good china or that special dish that came from your mother. Now you're bringing family and connection into something that's very personal for you. Touch is another sense that's really important here. Maybe you have something that's very tactile. You might have beads, a rosary, or these are simply fidget beads, if you will, from the Mediterranean culture, but it gives you a tactile sense of things. Perhaps there's a particular piece of clothing you wear. In many cultures, the Jewish culture, for example, there's a special set of clothing that one wears for prayer. Perhaps that's a tradition you could adopt. Again, this might be a chance as well to bring in something that's very special in your life and fold that into your worship. So, we've talked about creating an atmosphere of worship and devotion. We've talked about setting. We've talked about establishing place, time, and tone. We've talked about some different strategies to do this. And remember, this is your journey. This isn't about doing it right. This is about doing it in a way that is meaningful for you. So you might have to experiment with it a little bit. And that's okay. That's what this is all about. Don't forget you have lots of personal devotional materials. Perhaps it's the Book of Common Prayer that you can download or buy new and used copies. Perhaps there are resources. I like Edward Hayes' Prayers for the Domestic Church, but there are many, many others. There's a lot of material online. Explore. Use this time of worshiping at home as an opportunity to look at a tradition that's, again, overlooked, but can really help deepen and enrich our worship experience, our spiritual journey. And perhaps this will be something you'll continue even once we resume worshiping together again at a place like St. James. So with that, enjoy your journey.